Hey, what's up, New Zealand and the world? Lucas Lawman's Kiwi Voice. It's about time we talked about some globalist organisations. I've been talking about it a while myself that I was going to make a video, and today I've finally put the hours in to get something together for myself and for you all as an explainer. So over the past few years, as the COVID pandemic and countries' responses to it the world over accelerated further, sadly, the already rapid decline of our globally linked economy and domestic societies, the conversation around growing influence on national politics from unelected globalist bodies and corporate interests has become louder and more broad. Now, what global bodies and corporate interests am I talking about? Covering them all would be an hours and hours long movie. But today we're going to take a good look at the WHO, the UN, and the WEF. That one is the most interesting one for me. We're going to examine for each organisation, 1, who are they and what is their claimed remit? 2, who funds them? And 3, what are they actually doing and whether or not it seems they're having a direct effect on Kiwis. I'm leaving out individuals though from each organisation in the interest of keeping this video once again succinct and within the hour. I've pulled this all together from many different sources, as I always do, reporting and opinion and the organisations' websites themselves to try and get both sides of the story. I will reference source wherever possible, of course providing my own opinion and dot joining commentary where I see it as appropriate. Wouldn't be Kiwi Voice without me chucking my 2 cents in. Take that for what it is. I am happy to be proven wrong. My mind is completely and utterly open to any of this stuff. That is, of course, the beauty of Facebook. There are a comment section that enables conversation on the matter. So get amongst it. Correct me if you think I've got anything wrong. Let's get into it. The WHO, who are they? What is their claim remit? If you didn't know what the World Health Organization was before COVID, you certainly will now. They have become probably the most well-known global body on the planet due to the major role that you expect World Health Organization may well have played in managing the COVID-19 pandemic, issuing guidance, declaring states of emergency, and being at the forefront of the PR part of the pandemic response. Now, according to their website, who.int, we champion health and a better future for all, they say. Dedicated to the well-being of all people and guided by science, the World Health Organization leads and champions global efforts to give everyone, everywhere, an equal chance to live a healthy life. Now, they say founded in 1948, WHO is the United Nations agency that connects various nations, partners, and people to promote health, keep the world safe, and serve the vulnerable, so everyone, everywhere can obtain the highest level of health. Something I'm sure we could all get on board with if that was the case. What we do. WHO leads global efforts to expand universal health coverage. I wonder how that's going in America. We direct and coordinate the world's response to health emergencies, and we promote healthier lives, from pregnancy care through to old age, at 3 billion targets, outline an ambitious plan for the world to achieve good health for all using science-based policies and programs. Now, there are a bunch of initiatives and programs that the WHO states throughout their website that they are working on, and they become quite complex in the interests of expediency. And as we just covered that just now in their main blurb, let's clarify that 3 billion target. These targets are both a measurement tool and a strategy to deliver, as they say, 1 billion more people benefiting from universal health coverage, 1 billion more people better protected from health emergencies, and 1 billion more people enjoying better health and well-being. Now, there's a number of various stats, measures, metrics that they use to see how they're going on that front. Now, who funds the WHO? Referencing France24.com, the 194 member states of the WHO, which include New Zealand, have long since contributed the majority of their cash to individual short-term health projects of their choosing. So the country gives the money, they get to choose what project it goes into, which of course can fluctuate depending on what projects they want to get involved in. Then there is fixed membership fees based on population and wealth, but they account for barely 1/5 of the organisation's funding. The rest comes from private donors, where things you would expect might get interesting if you're a fan of the theory, follow the money. Things have swung in recent times, with USA moving down to third on the list of largest donors. They usually sit first or second, contributing $693 million in the 2021 year, with Germany taking top spot with $1.268 billion, or $1,268 million. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is in second with $751 million. Can you get your head around just that number, full stop? Contributed in the 2020-21 period. However, when you shift your eyes just a few lines lower, you'll see Gavi Alliance at $432 million, of which the Gates Foundation is the largest single donor. If we jump on over to confirm the Gavi funding, just quickly, we see they offered up $4.05 billion in the same period. So if you took some license on this and added those two together, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are almost on par with Germany's contribution at $1.183 billion, or $1,183 million. The WHO has now also successfully lobbied to have their member states' contribution restructured to over 50% being fixed membership fees. Now, they got this in May this year, looking to shore up cash flow, essentially. Member states currently channel most of their cash into short-term projects, as we mentioned before, but countries will now transition towards giving half of their WHO contributions as straightforward membership fees, instead giving that organisation more flexibility. I'll leave you with a simple question to ponder here, team. Why is a tech nerd, a computer programmer, a single guy, Bill Gates, the single biggest donor to the most influential global health organisation amid a multinational vaccine alliance? What's the interest? I question that simple basic question. You can get into all sorts of theories and conspiracy if you wish to, but I'm just going to leave you with that question, and one that you should potentially be asking. So, what is the WHO doing, and how does it affect New Zealand? Well, obviously, over the past couple of years, they have been absolutely affecting New Zealand, as they have pretty much every country on the earth. Not by way of rule or statute, but by way of issuing public health advice, and our experts and government somewhat following said advice. So influence only by influence, if you get my drift. The big move that would have more of a direct effect was made earlier this year, if they had succeeded here, and that was when the WHO attempted to have changes made to the IHRs, or the International Health Regulations, as part of the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. We covered a video on this in a live back in May, in quite a bit of detail then. Check it out here. Essentially, they were after policing powers to use against countries that didn't abide by the currently near enough voluntary obligations within that treaty. Now, they're binding, but the WHO has no policing powers. Thankfully, this was voted down in the end, at least until the next General Health Assembly in 2024. Sanity prevailed for now. Why would we want to provide an unelected global body with the power to control our response in any future pandemic after what we experienced in this one is beyond me. Now, my opinion, global health responses don't work. They don't take into account the thousands and thousands of variables in differing humans' different biological makeups, and the vastly differing climates, cultures, and systems that so many people around the world exist in. I think the WHO should be scrapped completely and health responses handed back to the sovereign nation states to handle as they see fit. Why does it need to come from a global central body? It just doesn't, especially one that was actively trying to gain policing powers against its member states. I'll leave that question with you. Alrighty, moving on to the UN. Who are they? What is their claimed remit? UN, or United Nations, was throughout the majority of my life, it was seen as a distant peacekeeping international relations organisation, is the way I would word it as I became older and understood, that top politicians and official type people seem to love. They got together every so often in a massive fancy hall and issued inspirational speeches and the like, but ultimately appeared a harmless, if somewhat useless, gathering of political and social elite that didn't really affect me too much. Man, how that has changed in the past decade or so, specifically the last 3 years. These days, it would appear, at least in the freedom community, these guys are seen as the second most concerning global body after the WEF, who we're going to cover at the end here, as their climate policy in particular, known as Agenda 2030, rapidly encroaches on the way of life of so many billions of people around the world, as the governments for these people seem hell-bent on achieving the unrealistic goals peppered within the agenda. According to their website, we'll give them that side first, the United Nations is an international organisation founded in 1945. Currently made up of 193 member states, the UN and its work are guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter. The UN has evolved over the years to keep pace with a rapidly changing world, but one thing that stayed the same, it remains the one place on earth where all the world's nations can gather together, discuss common problems, and find shared solutions that benefit all of humanity. Now, I am certain that there are millions of people in the world that would at least question that last paragraph. Now, if we get into the charter, it's lengthy. Let's stick with something that sticks out to me. In the charter, it states the United Nations can take action on a wide variety of issues due to its unique international character and the powers vested in its charter, which is considered an international treaty. As such, the UN Charter is an instrument of international law and the UN member states are bound by it. But as we mentioned before, they have no official policing powers, although they tried to gain them earlier this year and failed. The UN Charter codifies the major principles of international relations, from sovereign equality of states to the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. So that's where the peacekeeping comes in. Since the UN's founding in 1945, the mission and work of the organisation has been guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter, which has been amended 3 times in 1963, 1965, 1973. Now, it's difficult to really sum up what the UN truly do, as there are a million projects on the go and funded at any one time, and as such, this descriptor is deliberately broad. The key piece that most awake humans are concerned about is, again, Agenda 2030. So we'll focus on that for the purposes of this video in the last section of what are they doing. Firstly, though, who funds the UN? According to the Council for Foreign Relations, all 193 members of the United Nations are required to make payments to certain parts of the organisation as a condition of membership. The amount each member must pay, known as its assessed contribution, varies widely, and is determined by a complex formula that factors in gross national income and population. So they assess the state of your nation and they ask for X dollars. Why do I give you that info and not just flat out numbers? Well, the funding set up for the UN is so complex, though, through literally hundreds, if not thousands, of differing entities for differing projects in differing areas, it's almost impossible to get that summated figure, or summated figures. New Zealand pays its membership contribution like all 193 member states. That much I can tell you, but it's hard to even get that figure that we pay. If someone out there knows what it is, please let me know. Private contributions aren't received by the overall UN body itself, but hundreds of individual UN project organisations do receive private money. The UN Central Emergency Response Fund, for example, although their website here states only 2 private donors, the scrollable list graphic that they have on the website below actually contains numerous private organisations, including energy companies, development companies, and local government organisations. So summary, their budget is massive and most of it comes from member states. Our taxpayer dollars, essentially, but it is deeply time consuming to unravel the funding links in any more detail than that. As I say, I encourage you to have a look if you've got the patience and the time. What are they doing and does it affect New Zealand? The New Zealand Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade website states, in September 2015, the United Nations member states signed up to a universal set of 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and 169 targets, which is part of Agenda 2030. The SDGs establish a universal agenda for action to achieve sustainable global development. The new goals integrate the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, and are all applicable to all countries. The goals build on the lessons learned from the Millennium Development Goals, which focus specifically on developing countries. Now, this is what so many freedom-minded people in New Zealand and around the world are super concerned about. Since 2015, these SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and Agenda 2030 targets have been aggressively pursued by the majority of UN member states from around the world. The statement above should be and is a concern for all Kiwis. The collapse of society in Sri Lanka, with food and fuel shortages and 60% inflation numbers culminating in a storming of the presidential palace, is as a result of blind adherence to chasing these SDGs and 2030 agenda targets. Obviously not the sole cause, but the main driver, it's fairly clear to see. Netherlands farmer uprising? This is in direct response to the Dutch government action aggressively taken to meet Agenda 2030 targets in the name of climate change. Voices for Freedom have run detailed weekly webinars with Jaspreet and Jill. I believe it is. There's hours and hours and hours of info to go through on Agenda 2030. They're all over it. I urge you to look there, Voices for Freedom. I think they have a Rumble and a Odyssey page, but check out the website. It'll direct you for a deeper understanding. But essentially, Agenda 2030 contains 169 targets designed to move the world into a low carbon future, and multiple countries are going hard at them. The main issue includes drastically reducing farming output and replacing with other forms of lower emitting food production, and that appears at these early stages to be promoted as bugs and plant-based fake meat, among a myriad of other options, genetically engineered stuff, etc. It's leading to the banning of productive fertilizers and the shutting of farming operations at scale, at least in the Netherlands, and that is leading to entire countries suffering food shortages, as we've already reported on. So is this particular policy action from the UN affecting New Zealand? Absolutely it is. It is why groundswell now exists, and regulation after regulation are continued to be placed on Kiwi farmers, making food production so much more difficult. And the future is somewhat bleak in that regard. You know, it's all linked back to Agenda 2030. Now, my opinion, to me, this is the single most pressing issue New Zealand faces in the near to medium term. The single one. And not enough Kiwis realise where these regulations are heading. I've seen a lot of pro people out there for these and pushing it as hard as we are. You don't quite understand, I don't think. More noise needs to be made about this. More conversation needs to be had. More awareness needs to be raised about what these targets actually mean. Because when you muck around with food supplies, everything else just doesn't matter. We should exit any agreement with the UN and remove ourselves from following anything to do with Agenda 2030. Moving on to the juicy one, the WEF. Who are they and what is their claimed remit? The WEF is the World Economic Forum, if you didn't already know, headed up by the classic Bond villain Klaus Schwab. With his thick accent and caricature-like looks, it is probably the most talked about, mocked and investigated global body of them all. So much we could go into here, so much. But firstly, let's give their side of the story. Their website states, the World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. The forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. It was established in 1971 as a not-for-profit foundation and is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. It is independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interests. Independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interests. The forum strives in all its efforts to demonstrate entrepreneurship in the global public interest, while upholding the highest standards of governance, moral, and intellectual integrity is at the heart of everything it does. Our activities are shaped by a unique institutional culture founded on the stakeholder theory, which asserts that an organisation is accountable to all parts of society. The institution carefully blends and balances the best of many kinds of organisations from both the public and private sectors, international organisations, and academic institutions. Pretty lofty stuff from the WEF. Now, essentially, It is a large portion of the world's ultra-rich who get together to try and influence government policy around the world to assist in profit-making for their already massive multi-billion-dollar corporate organisations and empires. And really, it's truly not out of order to say that. It's widely known. Their board of directors includes Larry Fink, CEO of the $10 trillion asset manager BlackRock, known for extremely predatory housing asset accumulation. Fink capitalising on mass foreclosure and eviction events and buying up bulk housing stock in the States. CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff, Christine Lagarde, President of the European Central Bank, CEOs of Nestle, Siemens, AXA Insurance, and others, along with celebrities and anyone else who wants to spend the 50 grand to buy a ticket. Specifically, they get together in Davos each year, Switzerland, amongst a whole bunch of glitz and glamour, yearly, and what is probably the most highly guarded elite summit in the world. Media do get in, you do get coverage, but damn if you don't have to be friendly to the WEF to get that coverage. Numerous other outlets, and not just independents, mainstream as well, tried to get in there. Hasn't happened. So who funds the WEF? This one is pretty straightforward. It's funded by its members. They are super, super rich. The whole freaking lot of them. Swiss Info tells us the WEF is financed by business leaders whose companies generate annual revenue of more than Swiss franc 5,000 million or 5 billion, which is about 8.3 billion New Zealand dollars. Their contribution fees range from 60,000 francs to 600,000 francs annually. Most types of annual membership include the opportunity for the company president, CEO, or director to participate in the annual WEF meeting in Davos, but to do so, they must also pay an entrance fee on top of that membership fee, which costs roughly 25,000 Swiss francs or approximately 42 grand New Zealand dollars. Now, it is worth noting that plenty of heads of state and other senior political officials participate regularly in WEF events and attend Davos. So it could be surmised that their contributions to attend could be funded indirectly by taxpayers. Just throwing it out there. So what are they doing, and does it affect New Zealand? It's too easy to get into conspiracy theories of the WEF, just far, far too easy, because in reality, so much of what is talked about is conspiracy fact. They regularly release promotional videos to push their transformational ideas. Yes, they've talked about chip implants. Yes, they've talked about engineered food. And yes, they are fully on board with UN's Agenda 2030, essentially in partnership with them. Perhaps with their most famous promo, which is quoted more than anything else in the freedom community, it's this one. You can see how far, pretty easily, this sort of corporate propaganda could potentially be taken. Own nothing and be happy? No wonder this is talked about so often with freedom-minded Kiwis. The Great Reset is widely referenced also, and the term has been parroted out by political leaders all over the world, we need a great reset. There's no doubt in my mind this is happening right now. Linked with the UN. Jacinda Ardern is one of many global leaders currently in office that has gone through the WEF Young Global Leaders Program, or is an active member of the WEF themselves. These include Emmanuel Macron from France. He is part of Young Global Leaders. Justin Trudeau, he is a member of the WEF. Did you notice a trend with these types of leaders all over the world when it came to the pandemic response? Nasty passports, rhetoric around the unvaccinated, and penalties for not taking the jab. Does any of that link together? All of those leaders linked to the WEF had a very, very similar response, specifically in the way that they spoke. In 2019, Klaus Schwab and the WEF signed a strategic partnership framework with the UN to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. They stated, the partnership identifies 6 areas of focus: financing the 2030 Agenda, climate change, health, digital cooperation, that sends shivers down your spine, gender equality and empowerment of women, education and skills, to strengthen and broaden their combined impact by building on existing and new collaborations. Now the links from here are simple, as shown in my crude graphic here. You get my point though. It's not that many degrees of separation, aside from the fact that the New Zealand government actively promotes on their own website, as I mentioned earlier. This absolutely affects New Zealand and is right now. Now summary, you could look at all of these as one and the same, with money flowing in incredibly large amounts from one organisation to another through an intricate web of charities, foundations, large businesses, government departments even, and initiatives and power-hungry philanthropists. If you are able to be a skeptic and look to assess which pose the greatest threat to our nation, although the WHO has recently tried a significant power grab through trying to amend those IHRs and around pandemic management, you'd have to say of more immediate concern, specifically in the short term, is based on what we are seeing on Sri Lanka and Holland and now other parts of Europe as well. It has to be the WEF and UN combo and Agenda 2030, specifically around emissions reduction and what it will do to our food supply through blind adherence to it. I truly don't think people realise how close we are sleepwalking towards significant crises and other issues in the not too distant future. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with us. I really hope that explanation has been of use to you. Man, did it take me some time to get amongst all of that. There was a lot to disseminate. We could do a series of videos on this. It could just keep going. There's so much information to digest. But that should give you a decent background to those 3 organisations, in my opinion, based on the structure and facts behind them. Whether or not they're having an effect on New Zealand, remember there are political parties out there that have said that will repeal or remove from any international obligations that are linked to any of these if the people see fit. So keep an eye out, stay safe, stay awake, stay free, and we'll see you again real soon.